-2, -3 Celsius at the moment. It'll get like really fucking cold over winter, but we're heading to Austria in February and then back over to the States in March, and so kind of going to be in and out a little bit. So it's not too bad.
But by the way, guys, we are now live. So we were just talking about Lithuania because Dave's back over in his where he's based, which is in Lithuania. Troy Francis, James Tusk, joined by Dave Lee, internationally renowned male hormone optimization expert. Obviously, Dave, you can introduce yourself more fully than that, but this is primarily this is for people who are on our course, The Edge, but we've also opened it up, so got some more people in here as well. So the really key thing here is we're going to be talking about natural male hormone optimization primarily, but if you've got any questions about any of this stuff, then Dave is absolutely the man to ask. He's been the guy that we've, myself and James and other members of the team have gone to for a number of years now. He's really helped us on our journey with this stuff. And so if you've got anything to just get even this free time where you can put questions in the chat, come onto YouTube, by the way. You can come onto my channel, or you can go to James's channel, Tuscan Team. It's being played on both. Go into the chat, put questions, because this is your opportunity to get free advice on this stuff, which you're not going to get very often. So great opportunity. Anyway, with all that being said, Dave, did you want to sort of introduce yourself again? I know a lot of people know who you are, but did you just want to give a little précis and what your place in this space is and your take on all of this stuff, really?
I like internationally renowned hormone expert. That has a good ring to it. Yeah, so my name is Dave Lee. I currently reside in Lithuania, formerly from Australia. I am the part owner of two TRT clinics, one across Eastern Europe and the other one in Australia. And I have been an educator and speaker and I guess a health coach, trainer of various practitioners in the space now, coming up 6 years. My background was I was a musician for about 7-8 years as a singer and a drummer, not at the same time, separately. And suffered a brain injury in my mid-20s, which left me quite debilitated. And the only solution I had to that was going back to university and learning how to heal a nerve. It led me to hormone replacement therapy. And then what led me to this space, which I always like to bring up, is I got very uncomfortably red-pilled in about 2019. And Troy's content was one of the people that kind of helped me understand what was going on with intersexual dynamics, what was going on with my role in my, I guess, formation as a man in leading relationships. And I think there's a really exciting cross section here between my world and your world, because what you guys are teaching and what people listening are trying to achieve probably has more to do with what I talk about than people realize. So hopefully we can kind of flesh out some of that today.
Well, that's one of the things that we realized in the last year or so. And I mean, just very, very quickly, just from a dating sexual marketplace perspective, why would you say this stuff is so important, aside from all the other massive benefits of it?
Well, women, as I've heard, you guys all speak about before, women don't have some kind of magical sense of intuition. They're not magicians, but their intuition's pretty strong. And just like with if you're looking at pretty girls at a bar, or if you're out about at a venue, there are physical attraction cues that a woman gives off, but then there's an aura, there's an energy, there's a vibe that she has, which is everything from pheromones to body language to posture, articulation. There are so many factors there that communicate a lot about someone through nonverbal communication cues. Yeah. And hormones underpin a huge amount of how your nervous system operates and how your neurotransmitters operate. So your hormones really strongly indicate and then also express kind of like your factory default settings of how you show up. And if I think about this perspective, I mean, I'm married, I live overseas, but when I was younger and I was a singer in a band, I mean, I was very aware of how these dynamics play out in venues, how there is a hierarchy of who's approaching who and who's attracted to who. And a big part of male physical attraction cues is the energy that you give off that you can protect and provide. That's a huge factor. And testosterone is what ultimately facilitates that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it has to be said. And I mean, we were quite late to the party with this in a way. I mean, I think it's just not.
Has Troy vanished into the ether?
No, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry, I was trying to turn my camera off because I think my camera's a little bit
like the Columbo. I love it. One more thing.
It's not. In some ways, we were a bit late to the party with this because when you think about it, it's a very obvious thing, like male hormones, and people are actually with, say, pheromones, for example. People have been talking about that for a long time, but for some reason, we didn't really connect the dots. And I think when you look at the history of people teaching dating skills and game, a lot of it has been about, oh, say these lines, go up to her, the torero toe, you know, turn away a little bit so that she thinks you might walk off when you're talking to her. All these like techniques and stuff like that, and some verbal, you know, little stories and anecdotes you can tell. And all of that stuff has its place. But the reality is, if you're low testosterone, if your hormones aren't in place, then the way it's going to come across is going to be suboptimal. And that, I think, is the magic key that a lot of people are missing with this stuff. And yeah, carry on.
I very strongly agree, because I was speaking to my wife about it today, because she thinks it's hilarious and I'm talking about this stuff. But from a theoretical standpoint, and also just from a lived experience standpoint, it makes a huge amount of sense. If we create some kind of bizarro, like flipped alternate timeline where women hit on men and, you know, women approach men, and it's, you know, gender roles are reversed. If you imagine you've got a bunch of like 3 and 4 out of 10 girls coming up to you who are saying all the right things, they're funny, they're into the same stuff you're into, they're good at communicating, you're just going to be instantly friend zoning and eyeing out this, you know, tall blonde with the hourglass figure and the nice hair across the bar. And if you went up to her and she just said a few, you know, or she came up to you and she said a few things that were charming, you know, she had that game that you guys are teaching, then that would just blow all the other ones out of the water. And I think that what you guys are teaching is so valuable, because what you guys are teaching is communication. And communication is incredibly valuable. But what I think, if people are going to spend X amount of effort points into this, if the goal outcome is, you know, dating women or picking up women or finding a wife or whatever, then I think that the resources should be allocated across, like, learning this game and learning communication is important, but the better you can have yourself as a baseline archetype of a man, then you're not going to be trying to compensate from being a 3 or 4 out of 10, but being able to talk the game of an 8 or 9. You're going to be coming in being like, by default, because I can communicate well, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm well groomed, I have a decent sense of humor and a decent sense of intellect. By default, you're going to be in the top 5% of men. And then if you've also got some charm and you've got these skills, I mean, this in marketing and business, we call this a source of competitive advantage. Like, you would outcompete the majority of the people who are playing the same game.
100%. And the sexual market is the most ruthless market on earth, right? And that's why myself and Troy, having now worked with Dave for a while, it's gone a bit 1943's Germany, because we're kind of saying to guys, right, we're not going to work with you unless you get your bloods done. Because as myself and Troy both know, having worked with Dave, you know, this, I mean, what percentage of men would you say in the Anglosphere, Dave, over the age of 30 have got some issue around either testosterone or thyroid or growth hormone or a combination of all three? I mean, it's massive, right? And again, from the lens of dating, which me and Troy deal with, if you've got a car missing a couple of wheels, right, you know, you're not even going to get your foot in the door. I mean, we live in the most competitive dating market of all time now in historical terms, because you're competing with not just Stavros with his 8-pack on Instagram, it's AI Stavros. So women's expectations have gone through the roof, right? So you have to be that. You can't do all this mystery method 2000s, you know, fake your value. You have to be the high value guy. And part of that is getting your own house in order, you know, making sure you're not anxious, making sure you can get up early, making sure you get up and go, right? And making sure you've got a sex drive on point. And as you said, Dave, there's something about the vibe of a guy who's got his hormones sorted, right, on just on an energy and a vibe level that the women can sense, you know? And as you said, leaning into that masculine archetype, if you want a really hot, feminine Eastern European woman on your arm on a date, you've got to be the polar opposite, right? Which is a strong masculine man. So I think there's a lot of symbiosis between what you're doing and obviously what we're doing. And I'm glad we've kind of gone a bit more hardline with it, because the amount of dudes who are like, no, I haven't got any problems. And then we make them get their bloods done. And lo and behold, they're pre-diabetic. They've got terrible free testosterone, you know, and they've got a host of other, you know, health problems that get revealed. Mental.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, once again, I mean, we don't, at the same time, we don't want to sort of devalue the rest of what you're doing and just take it down to this very simplistic, oh, can I get laid with this or not? Because that would be because there's so much more to this, as we know. And I mean, I think when I've spoken to you in the earlier days, Dave, about this, I mean, my interest was more about the drive and the focus and the ability to do tasks better and to perform better as a man. Like, the idea of dating was almost secondary for me. So there is so much more to this than just the dating stuff. However, let's be real, a lot of people come to our content because they want to get laid, they want to get better with women. And so, we also have to acknowledge that this is part of it. And there is this kind of effect. I mean, let's not derail the conversation because you've got more important stuff to talk about. But I mean, women do notice you more, in my experience, when you are in a higher testosterone state or when you're in a more optimized state. Would you agree with that?
Hugely. I think that when it comes to how women would interact with you and notice you by default, I think that it comes down to that there is a unspoken dominance hierarchy in every room that you're in, just defaults to, and it's based off pheromones and it's based on physicality. And this immediately creates a sense of respect. And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about high testosterone, whether it's TRT or natural, is that you'll become some like aggro, hyper-violent, like roided up dickhead. And that's a product of non-bioidentical high-dose anabolic steroids. But when it comes to optimal testosterone levels, it tends to promote a baseline state of stoicism. And it doesn't give it to you for free, but it predisposes you to this state because you are biologically less stressed. In my experience and understanding of women tend to be more attracted to less stressed, less neurotic men because that's the rock that their waves of crazy crash against. So when you give off the vibe in a club that you're nervous and anxious and edgy and like that's you've immediately disqualified yourself to 90% of them there. Whereas if you are genuinely embodying the game that you are trying to fake, then that's something that's going to come through and speak volumes. And I think that's the thing that, as I said before, I think the stuff that you guys are teaching is fantastic because it's an essential part of the equation. It's just that it's a part of the equation that you can get good at, but then if you get good at all of this stuff, then it would become effortless to be able to use those skills that you guys are teaching because the interaction is going to be so much more genuine on both sides because the woman is going to be interested by default.
Yes,
sure.
Exactly. And once again, it comes back to this thing where, and we keep trying to teach this, and I find it's very hard to articulate without sounding woo-woo and sort of, esoteric, but there is something about the nature of the interaction that is going to make the difference. So I could walk up and say, well, say me or say somebody who's good at this stuff, right? Could walk up and say exactly the same things. Self-deprecation, not a good idea, guys. Could walk up and say exactly the same things as somebody who is in a less optimized state as far as all this stuff is concerned. And the first guy would be successful and the second guy would get blown out of the water. So, and as James always says, whatever it is, like 70 or 80% of communication is nonverbal. But so much of it is what you're emanating. And I think a lot of what you're emanating is dictated by your hormonal state.
100% agree, and we always quote Peterson, don't we? But women want a man who has potential for havoc in him. A low T man has no potential for fucking havoc. He's one of the sheeple. So we'll let Dave go into the details, and this is going to be juicy because rarely do we actually hear, and we're always getting questions from guys who don't particularly want to go onto TRT and they want to weigh up their options first. And the process, just to be clear with Dave, is if you do a consult with him, he's not although he does look like some bearded, alpha Viking, he's actually, we respect about working with him. He's very health conscious, and he's actually always telling me and Troy to rein it in and just behave. And what he'll try and do with clients is go natural first, because that is, keep it off the synthetic. And if you really can't do that because your results are completely fucked, then he'll go straight to, okay, well, look, I'm not going to bullshit you. This is what you got to do. But yeah, I guess launch into the any natural stuff you'd like to talk about, Dave.
Yeah, so this has become a massive area of interest for me. I just got back from a trip doing a bunch of in-person podcasts in the States and speaking at the Olympia and the Silverback Summit about how this topic ties into TRT. And I guess that one of the opening points I'd like to make here is that, I was born in '92, so the male archetypes that I kind of idolized when I grew up were the rock stars, but also characters like Harvey Specter from Suits, Hank Moody from Californication, these kind of archetypes of these men with swagger that were good at communicating with women, they just had that just vibe that made them irresistible. The problem that I saw a lot of guys run into, both in my personal life and in my professional life, is that they don't realize that these characters are fictional. And if they want to be more like these characters, they need to follow the diet and lifestyles of the actors who play them, not the characters themselves. You can't drink the amount of whiskey that Harvey Specter does and have the same role and physique as him. It simply doesn't work that way. So there's a trade-off that we have to look at here. And I think that if guys are enjoying going out on a Friday or a Saturday to the club and having a few drinks for the social lubrication and going out on a date and having a cocktail and having that interaction, then what you all really need to understand when you're listening to this is that if you want to be a healthy, high testosterone man when you're interacting in those situations, you have to take care of yourself meticulously well for the other 6.5 days a week. Because that's just the way that it is. It's not 80-20, it's 95-5. Because we are all living in a world that is extremely estrogenic and extremely toxic. So to be able to have this leeway on the weekend that a lot of guys who in this space, I imagine, want to have, you really have to rein in your daily habits. And it's the reason why I've become very interested in this area is that this is all the shit that guys on TRT think that they can just bypass. They can just go, oh, well, fuck that. I'm not really interested in that. I just want to be able to fit my macros and hit the gym a few times a week and, just get the testosterone and have the shortcut. And this is what causes an immense amount of side effects. In my profession, one of the biggest issues is troubleshooting. And the vast majority, and I've just given a lecture series on this, the vast majority of problems that guys have on TRT are from the diet and lifestyle factors that would suppress their natural production would they not be on TRT. So if you go on TRT, if you want to put a Ferrari engine in your car, the rest of the car has to be a fucking Ferrari, and you have to be able to handle that thing going around the corner. This is what so many guys are not understanding. So what I've been spending the last 1.5, 2 years trying to teach my guys on TRT to do is all the same stuff that you can ideally try and exhaust to not end up on TRT. And then if you do have to go on TRT because it doesn't work and your body doesn't respond, and we can discuss why that would be, then you're going to be primed. Like, it's just like you've basically built the body of the Ferrari. You've learned to drive the race car on the track. And now if you do have to put the TRT in, you're actually going to have a good experience with it. So that's the kind of conceptualization for what I want to talk about. When it comes down to the executables, one of the challenges that men have when they're trying to get their health together, and women, is that there's a whole bunch of shit on the internet that people have very good intentions about. But if you read the wrong website, if you try to achieve the same goal, one website's going to tell you to be a vegan, the other one's going to tell you to do endurance running, the other one's going to tell you to do a carnivore diet, the other one's going to tell you to do powerlifting. It can be very confusing because there's all these different contradicting messages to reach the same goal. One of the advantages of what I've been doing over the last few years, which is running multiple clinics and troubleshooting, I get all the guys come to me when they've seen everyone else to solve the problems, is that we can objectively see what impacts the blood positively, what impacts the blood negatively, what gets people to feeling like the King Kong high libido Superman guy when they're on TRT. And the big factors when it comes back down to it, and I'm actually borrowing this concept from Wes Watson. I know he's quite polarizing, but this is a very important point, is that the majority of people know exactly what they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, know exactly what they're not doing that they should be doing. And what I think is very important to understand is that you are the product of the habits, the food that you put into the body, the liquid that you put into the body, how you've treated your body chronically over the last X period of time. And the example that I'll give from my personal life, which was quite big for this, is that I've got 2 bulging discs in my back, which left me with years of debilitating migraines, like vomiting from pain multiple times a week. Wow. And I woke up one day and I was like, if I'd done all the stretching and mobility that I know I should do, if I'd done that every day for the last year, I wouldn't be in this situation. And that I knew exactly what would make a difference. If I'd gotten up and done 20, 30 minutes of mobility every morning consistently for a year, I could have got myself out of it. But every day I made an excuse why I hadn't done it. And then I was the product of someone who hadn't done that. And that made me really fucking miserable because I was like, I had the skills, I had the consistency to change this. I just didn't apply myself. So for the last 2 years, I've done stretching and mobility every single day and I have no pain. And this is the kind of thing that I want the guys listening to this to understand is that, for example, if you had, consumed an extra 50 grams of protein and done an extra 50 push-ups a day every day for the last year, you'd look better in the t-shirt that you're going to wear to the club tonight. Like, very simple. And that can be extrapolated out into so many other things. And I think the biohack, the shortcut to this is being like, well, how can I actually take pride and enjoy the journey, not the outcome? Because otherwise you're just prolonging gratification and that's a willpower thing. But if you can take pride in being the guy who has his shit together and then on a Friday or Saturday night goes out and reaps the reward of that or puts that to work, then I think that's the formula and recipe for success. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can go into the actionables of what that would look like.
Yeah, I think you mentioned two important points there, Dave. You're talking about really the James Clear thing, right? The atomic habits, right? Becoming your habits form your identity and your identity forms your habits, but also then brutal self-honesty and accountability. So have you got any tips around how to do that? Because we all, I mean, it's the same with the cold approach stuff, right? Me and Troy have consistently said it. If guys just get out of the house every day, go for a walk, be a social animal every day, banter when they get the opportunity to, and then approach 2 or 3 girls every day, they will have a top 0.1% dating life. But the reality is guys will do everything they can to avoid doing the things they know they have to do. So from a fitness point of view, is there anything that you've seen that's worked consistently with clients to help them really be, take control of that self-responsibility and self-accountability piece?
There's a couple of things. Like one thing that I deal with a lot with my client population, I have a lot of married guys, and the issue is that they go on TRT, their libido goes through the roof, and then their, perimenopausal 40s wife, her libido is in the gutter. So there's a big disconnect. And they're like, oh, I need to get my wife on HRT. And I'm like, would you fuck you? Like, would look yourself in the mirror now. Would you want to go that? Like, it's so important that we have some degree of radical self-honesty here because it has to be realistic. And that's a really, really big factor that I think is really important is you have to make an honest audit of where you're at. Like if you're in a situation being like, I want to sleep with this many girls of this quality or whatever guy, or I'm looking for a wife or looking for a girlfriend or whatever the goal is with intersexual dynamics, you really have to make an honest assessment and go, would I even qualify to the kind of girl that I'm interested in? Because some guys are just fucking delusional with this.
So
that's
are you saying that some of those clients, they get on TRT and then perhaps they're still not in the greatest shape. They still haven't sorted out the other stuff. And then they're like, but their libido's really high. And they're like, oh, why isn't she having sex with me? And it's like, well, look at yourself honestly. Are you actually the kind of guy who is, worthy of that at this particular moment in time? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and it's like, does she have, menopausal libido problems, or is she fantasizing about, Harvey Specter and Hank Moody? Like this kind of stuff is, it's really important for these guys to understand that it's the TRT. One of the problems, or one of the drawbacks of TRT, maybe not problems, is that it gives you a reward that you haven't earned. And one of the problems of getting that reward is there's a biological disconnect, but you also haven't gone through the process of all the hardships and challenges that come with maintaining optimal health and testosterone levels, because there's a lot of learning and discipline that comes with that. So if you've got testosterone levels of a 21-year-old athlete and you've got the physique and the lifestyle of a 45-year-old alcoholic accountant, then there's going to be a real circumstantial disconnect there with how you're interacting with the world. And it can kind of feed into some guys' delusions. So when it comes to the fitness stuff, I don't have any affiliate, I don't have any kind of financial connections with anything I'm going to recommend here. I think the guy who gets the most right with this, who's got the most right for the longest time, is Gregor Gallagher, Kino Body. 3 heavy workouts a week, tracking aggressive overload, 10 to 12,000 steps a day, focusing on the muscle areas that create the shoulder to hip ratio. That's the secret. It's focusing on the key compound lifts that build progressive strength in those areas, incorporating body weight training, which is really important, and just getting your steps in. 3 heavy workouts a week. And then the important part and the contentious part is nutrition. Everyone disagrees on nutrition. And when it comes to nutrition, and I guess kind of coming back to another kind of meta point that I want to make in this webinar is that I don't know anything about women, but I know a lot about dudes, which is not ideal, but that is what it is. And what I know about dudes is that if I tell someone to do something, if I tell a guy to do something, he's not going to fucking do it. But if I teach him why it's in his best interest to do it, he'll do it. Men need to logically understand the why. So if someone is having trouble eating right, or going to the gym properly, or going to the bed at a reasonable hour, they need to learn why this is causing this problem. They need to learn how those dots are connected, because then they'll actually do it. The problem is if I go, you need to go to bed early, eat clean, go to the gym, and not drink alcohol, guys are going to go, I know this guy and he is good. I don't know. But if guys can learn and go, I've got these symptoms because I'm out of alignment here, and this is how this connects to that, and I can understand this in words and concepts and analogies that make sense to me, then you're actually going to be able to solicit and drive change. So the nutrition ones, and the nutrition one everyone disagrees on, and calories are important, but the idea that all macronutrients are equated from a health outcome standpoint is absurd. If you eat Pop-Tarts and protein shakes and McDonald's for a week and you equate the macros, and then you eat clean steak and eggs and good quality dairy and clean organic fruits and vegetables, you might have the same body composition at the end, but you're going to feel completely different, and then you're going to live completely differently. So the way, I think the way to look at nutrition is going, all these people disagree, but what do the majority of them agree on? If we have Venn diagrams for all the different nutrition people, what's the cross section that most people agree on? And that's generally where the truth is. And it's high protein, prioritizing red meat. Egg yolks are very dense in micronutrition, particularly the fat-soluble nutrients that make testosterone. And the other nutrient that is abundantly important and is limited depending on where you live is the sun. And if you can get outside, eat good quality red meat, if you can't afford good meal prep, you need to learn how to fucking cook. You have 2 choices: either afford food that can be made for you and prepared in a clean way, or learn to cook food that you enjoy eating. You have to do one or the other. And the problem is people do neither, and they end up just eating Uber Eats all the time. So one of the ultimate biohacks for any bachelor kind of guy is learn to cook a meal that is centered around red meat that you enjoy more than anything that you can order off Uber Eats. If that's the biohack, that's the win. If you can learn how to cook beef mince and rice, or beef mince and potatoes, and you can learn how to season it and top it and prepare it in a way that makes your mouth water and you get excited to eat that. If you can't afford good quality meal prep or a personal chef, that has to be done. That's a skill that you have to develop. I'm very sick of guys telling me they can't cook. I can't sail a boat. Doesn't mean that I couldn't if I'd learned. I've just never learned the skill. Same with cooking. You're not born knowing how to cook. So these things, it's really important to know with good quality red meat as the foundation. And if you can't afford someone to cook it for you, you have to learn how to cook it yourself in a way that you look forward to. That's the bio.
Yeah. Well, that's I've got to be transparent here. I mean, my Achilles heel probably is the nutrition side of things. I mean, I've been through periods of being very, very good with nutrition, periods of being less good with nutrition. Exercise, I have to say, I'm pretty on top of, because I enjoy the gym. I actually enjoy, you get a bit of an endorphin rush. And one thing I would say, and one of the most useful things of many useful things I think you've ever said to me, Dave, is you've got to meet the medicine halfway, or words to that effect. It's like you've got the medicine, but it's not enough just to do some kind of TRT and then think, right, okay, I can sit back and I'm going to become James Bond. It's not like that. You actually have to do the work as well. One thing I would say from my experience is that by entering into this journey, it's actually made my workouts better. I actually feel more focused now. I feel like my form is better. I'm really focusing on form. I'm really focusing in a way that perhaps I wasn't before. That might be mental. I suspect it's got something to do with, the protocols that I'm using. But and now I've forgotten the original point. But you've got to you've got to actually do the stuff to become that guy, and that includes, yes, exercise, but also nutrition. And again, for me, that's my Achilles heel, really. So again, it comes down to habits, doesn't it? It's like, how do we establish good habits and then stick to them? And that, I think, is the key problem for many of us in different areas.
It is. And in terms of like recognizing that we're all humans at different points in the journey of life, is that it's also about recognizing like how far off track you are, or how far away you are from the person that you ultimately could realistically be if you tried. And like, you know, looking at yourself, like, I mean, I follow you on Instagram. I've followed you for some time. You're very clearly lean. You've got good muscular development. Like you seem to be in a relatively good place in your life. So I would say that you'd have a bit more leeway than someone who's overweight, hates their job, miserable, can't communicate with women. Like there's a point that you kind of have to look at and go, okay, like the better I'm doing, the more room I have for cheat meals. And then that expands out to everything. You can definitely, and this makes sense, right? The healthier you are, the more you can get away with in bursts and moderation. So I think a really good example is like Alex Hormozzi. Like that dude's diet is horrific, but it's high protein, and he clearly has a very good foundation that he's built this on, so he can get away with it. He's doing really, really well. If you take someone who's
never missed desserts, or is his thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's like a protein bar and a protein shake for breakfast, and then like a steak for lunch, and then just whatever for dinner. And like that, if you're doing well, that's fine. Like I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners and processed junk, but if you're doing well, you've got your, like, he's clearly very fit, very articulate, doing fantastic. When you're sitting at the top of the castle, you can have a beer. Like, I mean, that's, your body can tolerate that. But if you are inflamed, if you've got metabolic syndrome, if you've got fatty liver disease, if you've got all these health problems, you have to take care of yourself a lot better to get on track. And then I think a big issue that I see, whether it's in fitness, health, mental health, everything, is that guys are wanting to do maintenance effort to achieve transformational results. So if you're like, well, I'm training well, I've kind of got this stuff in place, my nutrition's a bit off, you're probably at a maintenance point, which if you're happy with that, that's cool. But if someone's like, I'm off track, I'm doing shit, but I want to be able to, be lax with XYZ, then it's unrealistic. So I guess it just depends on if guys are going, I want to get from down here to up here, or if I just kind of want to cruise and maintain where I am. And I think it's a different strategy.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I think what we are attempting to teach on the Edge and the other courses that we do is we're trying to get guys to transcend. We're all works in progress, right? We're trying to do the same. We're trying falteringly to get to the highest level we can get to, because what's the point of sort of being like, well, I'm good enough, so okay, let's leave it there, right? We want to really, there should be something a bit more, in my view, there should be something a bit more aspirational, right? It should be like, no, I want to get better, I want to get leaner, I want to get fitter, I want to get, whatever it is. So that's what we're trying to encourage guys to do. But obviously, in the end, it's their life. They can do what they want to do. If they get to a point and they're happy and they're like, okay, fine, cool. But it's just that there's always another level to climb, isn't there?
Absolutely. Self-development is a path, is a never-ending journey. And it's why there's a couple of things that I brought up recently in some content that I made. One is that I think that it's important that you keep pushing the goal further down the road, but you also give yourself some credit where credit's due sometimes. Like if you've come really far and you keep moving the goal further down the road, you can't constantly be hard on yourself because you're never going to be good enough. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. So I think it's good to, at the same time, you have to push yourself, but you also have to be proud of yourself. I'm very big on the idea of being proud of yourself. And the reason why I think being proud of yourself is important is that, one, it just makes you not miserable. But two, life is full of participation medals, but that voice inside your head does not give out a participation medal. It knows exactly who you are and how you show up when no one's around. It knows if you keep your word to yourself. It knows if you're putting on a facade. It knows if you're a fucking hypocrite behind closed doors. And if you don't do right by that voice in your head, you will develop insomnia because it will keep you awake every night with guilt and anxiety, and it will torture you until you basically, pummel it into submission with drugs and alcohol, which a lot of people do. So one of the solutions for having good, not only internal mental health, but then a mental health status that emanates a really positive, optimistic, confident, proud aura is to genuinely be proud of yourself. And that's not easy because you have to go, I am living up to my potential. And that's a really big mountain to climb. But it's also recognizing and going, we're all flawed, and that's okay. No one's perfect. But I'm playing my strengths, I'm working on my weaknesses, and every year I'm better than who I was last year. And I think
that's true.
If you're consistent, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, and it's this combination of sort of like, okay, maybe I'd like to be Hugh Jackman, but at the moment, obviously, I'm nowhere near that. But I did go to the gym today, and I did do 10,000 steps, and I did do, whatever else. I ate well, or whatever it is, right? And it's the same with the game stuff. It's like, okay, I want to become this like international Lothario, and I'm nowhere near that. But I did go and talk to 2 women that I never met before and pay them a compliment. Okay, so I think it's a sort of a combination. I think it's almost like you've got a meta level, right? This is my top level god tier goal. But at the same time, you've got to just, like you say, be proud of yourself for doing the small steps, because it's the small steps that are going to get you there. And I think sometimes, you hear about this, don't you? You hear about guys who don't want to go to the gym. They become intimidated to go to the gym because they think, I'm going to walk in the gym, I'm super skinny or I'm super overweight, there's going to be all these ripped guys in there, I'm going to feel like an idiot. I personally, and I'm not patting myself on the back for this, I personally never had that, because I just thought, well, fuck it. I just thought, okay, I'm not in great. I was really super skinny, whatever, when I first went to the gym many years ago. I thought, fuck it, I'm going to go in because at least I'm trying. And if people are going to be critical of that, well, to hell with them, right? And the reality is, nobody's ever said anything to me in all the years I've been going to the gym. Nobody's ever said anything to me like, "Oh shit, man, you're a bit skinny. What are you doing here?" People just don't do that. So you've got to ignore what you think other people might be thinking about your progress, and remember that the race is with yourself, not with other people, because there's always going to be somebody better than you in any sphere, really.
Completely. I think that no one cares because everyone just is too busy caring about themselves, which is totally fine. Like, no one's judging you. No one gives a fuck. No one's even thinking about it. But when it comes to, there's always that voice of this fear of losing external validation that never mattered and never existed in the first place. And one of the things I constantly see guys tripping over is that they are constantly seeking approval and validation from people that they don't know. And the most important thing that you can do as a man, like for women, external validation is important. Validation of how pretty they are is important for a lot of the way that society functions. Whether people like it or not, that's reality. But when it comes to being a man, your value comes from your capacity. It's who you are. It's what you can do. It's how you show up. And that's a huge part of not only your attraction cues as a man, but also your quality of life. So validation has to come from within. And that validation, it's much harder to earn internal validation because you can't fake it, because it all has to be legitimate. And the way that I like to frame it, you guys mentioned Jordan Peterson before. I had the privilege of meeting him on a flight recently. He was sitting across from me. And one of the things that I got to speak to him about was, I said that the token, I really appreciate the content you made, and it really, helped me get through a difficult period. And he goes, how? I was like, fuck, I wasn't ready for that. So I thought about it, and I used the example that he always talks about making your bed. And I think that this is a really good example. And when I was reflecting on it, it's this idea that I personally don't care about having a made bed. I see an unmade bed or a made bed, I genuinely don't care. But I take pride in being the guy who has his shit in order, because I like being that person, and I'm proud to be that person. And being the guy who keeps his stuff in order brings me pride. That brings me more enjoyment and pride, just having all my shit in the right place, because I don't care. But what I do want to be is someone who has values and consistency and routine, because I know that that's important. They're important male attributes. And the way that I've been trying to teach guys in terms of how to apply this, like day to day, is that you visualize, or you think about being like, what's the best version of me that I could become? And generally that's going to be an amalgamation of probably a few people that you've met and a few, celebrities or YouTube people that you look up to. And it's going to be this mismatch of all these different attributes and different people that you look up to combined with you. So this guy's up here and you're here. And then what you want to do is go, okay, how do I close the gap from here to here in the most efficient process possible? That's logical. It's going, okay, well, if I want to get from here to the top of the cliff, I'm not going to just jump up. I'm going to create steps. And the more small steps you can make, the easier the climb. So sometimes the solution isn't going, where do I start? It's going, okay, how do I work backwards? And then where do I start? And how do I work backwards? And find a way to meet in the middle. And the thing that I really like guys to visualize is who is this guy? Not just like, what does he look like, but how does he speak to people? How does he interact with a waiter? What does he wear? How does he smell? What's his daily routine? What's his workout routine? What's his diet? All these aspects of this guy. And then look at going, okay, how can I adopt small, stackable aspects of this guy that's going to be easy for me to start with, and then I can start to get some momentum and build up. And this is where I think starting with like having the same bedtime every night, having a consistent meal every day that's consistent towards your goals, having a consistent workout routine, having a consistent 10,000 step target. Like there's all these different things that you could do that would be more beneficial to one person or another. But it's going this guy. The difference between this guy and this guy is just what we do daily, consistently, the majority of the time. Well, and adopting this guy's habits and moving more towards this guy and away from this guy, the themes that these things have in common, they all just come down to diet and lifestyle. And really, it is truly about eating good quality, clean nutrition consistently, exercising to the point that you have a lean body fat percentage and a good amount of muscle. A good way to test that is, do you look good naked? Very easy test for that. If you're under 15% body fat, you'll generally look good naked.
Let's find it. Oh, all right, we won't. Sorry, Karen.
And these things are really good goals. As you start to make progress, you'll feel better about yourself. It's a self-perpetuating, rewarding cycle. Yeah. But we have to get addicted to the progress, and we have to take pride in putting the work in, not just achieving the outcome.
Yeah, and I think you said earlier about falling in love with the process, which is, it's one of those things that gets said a lot in the self-help space. But like many, cliches, it's said a lot for a reason, because it's true. So you've got to, wherever you are now, you've got to just think, okay, maybe I'm a bit overweight, maybe I'm a bit, my habits aren't great, maybe my food's not great. Okay, fine, that's my baseline. How do I make it 1% better tomorrow, and then 1% better, the next day or the next week or whatever? And you've got to, and I think that radical honesty you talked about is also important, and I think we're all guilty of it, really. We can sort of gloss over some of the flaws that we have, and we sort of, oh, that's fair enough, that's good enough. But it probably isn't good enough. And if we were radically honest with ourselves, say, okay, not in a self-punishing way, but just to sort of like, okay, look, the reality is I could be working harder on my business. The reality is I could be eating better. The reality is I could be doing this better, and I'm not. So how do I improve those processes? But again, what's the carrot that's going to draw people in? And of course, the carrot that we have, built this whole little community on is dating, because again, and it's not all about women or dating by any means, but let's face it, most guys want to get laid. Most guys want to become intimate with women. Most guys want to maybe get married and have a partner and all the rest of it. And if they're not getting that, then you've got to look at these things. So that could be your carrot. Maybe that's good enough as your sort of like higher purpose. It's like, right, I want that. So how do I get to that? Well, I'm going to have to look a bit better. I'm going to have to be in better shape. I'm going to have to be, et cetera, et cetera. But you need a why as well, don't you? You need like a strong why, I think.
So I've got a 6-month-old puppy at the moment, and I've never owned a dog before, and it's wonderful. He's the best, but having a puppy is a fuck ton of work. And when they talk about puppy training, there's two types. There's basically, do this and I'll give you a treat, or if you do this, I'll punish you or yell at you or whatever. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And the the consensus that I seem to have come to in my research is that the most effective way to train them is a combination of both, done tactfully. I haven't really cold approached women before. I did unconsciously, I did the technique you guys called peacocking when I was in my band. They approached me. But when it comes to cold approaching women, I can imagine there is no way to get instantaneous, very honest feedback about what your deficits are. I can imagine that they are just a fucking mirror right back in terms of being like, oh, this is where I'm not qualifying. So that's your negative reinforcer. And that's a useful tool. But if you only give a puppy negative reinforcement, he's going to grow to resent you. And I think this is how guys end up probably getting blackpilled. So the other side of the equation is that this, like what we've been talking about, is falling in love with the process. And again, I don't think men respond well unless they understand why. So this is a very basic kind of neuropsychiatry lesson. So there's different things your brain makes you feel a certain way. So when you hug someone that you love, you release oxytocin. That's that nice feeling when you're hugging someone that you love and care about. And when you do something motivating or driven, or you bump a line of cocaine, that's dopamine. That rush and drive and momentum forward, that's dopamine. And men are very accustomed to transmitting and synthesizing dopamine. It's the fuel that makes us basically like a boulder rolling forward with momentum. Momentum is the cure for depression. It's being in progress towards a goal. So I'll give two examples here. I, growing up, never kept my room clean. Again, didn't really care. But when my first girlfriend came over for that first night, I cleaned my room. It was like hotel clean. Like I had never cleaned my room like that because I had a motivator. I actually cared. My mom could tell me to clean my room all she fucking wanted. It didn't produce any dopamine. It was just pure discomfort. But when I was cleaning my room before this girl came over, this was like the most important thing of my entire life. I was like, this is the biggest night ever. That dopamine rush from cleaning that room was huge because it had meaning. It meant something to me. And this is why it's important to fall in love with the process, because you have to give it genuine meaning. So if you take pride in cleaning your room versus if you just clean your room because you have to, your brain will release very different neurotransmitters in response. When I was in the States, I spent a lot of time with my very good friend Ali Gilbert, who put together the Silverback Summit. She's one of the coolest people in the world. And this chick never fucking breaks her diet ever. Like I've seen everyone have every cheat meal ever. Never seen this bitch cheat once. Ever, never seen it. And she's small. She's very lean. Like I don't know what her daily calories are, but she doesn't have a lot to play with. But we went to all the best restaurants in West Palm in Florida, all the best barbecue places, all the best steakhouses. And, we'd go to this barbecue place and she'd get like 100 grams of smoked turkey. Or we'd go to like a steakhouse and she'd just get like the filet with sauce on the side and she wouldn't touch it. And just like the clean, I never saw her break ever. And I could tell I lived with her for a month, and I could see that she got more dopamine and more pride out of not breaking than everyone else got from having that cheat meal and breaking, because she was like, I'm not breaking when all of you guys are. And that's part of who I am. And I've got the results to show for it. I mean, she's more shredded than most people I've ever met. And she took pride in not breaking. And I think that she enjoyed her turkey breast more than the other guys enjoyed the burger because it came with the side of guilt. So it's important to have these positive and negative reinforcers. But it's also really important that we understand and go, taking pride in the process makes it meaningful, and making something intrinsically meaningful makes it more significant neurologically. And then you're going to be more likely to get addicted to being consistent with what you're trying to achieve.
Well, Wes Watson talks about it, doesn't he? He goes, sacrifice creates paradise, and he's big on just sticking to the process, right? And I'd agree with that. I think when we've stuck to stuff that we said we're going to do, and we actually follow through, you build that self-confidence, right? That self-trust. We've got a few questions here, actually. One of them from Richie, who you did a consult with. He said, let me just pull it up. It was about sleep. Where are we? Here we go. Beastie. Do you have any tips for improving sleep? I keep waking up at 3 a.m. even though I have a bedtime routine, exercise, and take melatonin.
I often reference my grandma. And a lot of the stuff that our grandmas told us growing up has been scientifically validated. Spoonful of honey before bed. The reason why it's honey is that honey contains a 50-50, it contains the same sugar profile as a piece of fruit. So it's basically, you get instant release sugar and slow release sugar. A lot of the reason why people will wake up between 3 and 5 a.m. is they have a stress response because they're dreaming about something that makes them anxious, and they go hypoglycemic and they get an adrenaline cortisol spike. So having a spoonful of honey before you go to bed is a game changer. I also like to, and again, I don't want to get too into supplements, but if you've got the routine down and all that kind of stuff, there's 2 products I really like. One is, it's a magnesium powder called Calm. It comes as like an effervescent, naturally flavored powder, so you can mix it up and it tastes good. And a couple of spoonfuls of collagen protein into that. Tastes really nice, like you can pick whatever kind of fruit flavor you want. And that way you get something that's got all these sedating amino acids from like glycine and proline with the magnesium and then a bit of honey. And what this is doing is it's borrowing from a lot of what Ray Peat taught, which is basically going, how can we reduce biological stress with nutrition and also do it in a way that's actually giving you nutrients as well. So spoonful of honey and then a serve of the Calm magnesium powder and then 10 to 20 grams of collagen. I'd have that as like a pre-bed cocktail if you've got everything else down pat.
Cool. Okay. And what was the other thing you recommended for sleep, or was that the sleep stack?
That's the sleep stack. I mean, everything else is something that, you know, is kind of, you know, consuming, you know, cutting off your caffeine earlier, like all the stuff that we know we should be doing. That stuff's so important. The other one that's important, and I mean, I don't know how much this plays into what's going on with this gentleman, but a comfortable sleeping environment is really important. And like, you know, not everyone based on when they're traveling can make all this stuff happen, but like I have a really firm mattress, a really firm pillow. I recently got a maternity pillow, which is something that you can like, it's like a big U that you can like put your leg up on, so you can kind of get some hip leverage and kind of spoon it. If you've got like back pain or discomfort, finding a way to get comfortable in bed. And sometimes it's about having a firmer surface, not a softer surface, and then making the room cool and having some white noise in the background. Sometimes changing the condition of the room is going to make a much bigger difference in how you sleep than what you're swallowing before you go to bed.
Okay, great. And we've got a question.
Violet under the pillow.
What was that?
Violet's meant to, the scent of violet's meant to help you sleep apparently as well. That's an old grandmother thing.
One from
like the lavender spray and stuff,
sorry,
that kind of stuff. I think there's one.
Yeah.
Alex Goo's question: what do you think about using clomiphene? Is it safe and effective alternative to TRT?
Someone at the seminar that I spoke at asked about what place clomiphene has in TRT, and my answer was in the bin. Clomid sounds great. If Clomid was what people make it out to be, we'd all use it. It'd be the best thing in the world. The problem with Clomid, and also by extension N-clomiphene, which is what's getting touted a lot more recently, is that what you're basically doing is you're blocking estrogen receptors in the entire brain as well as other organs in the body to send the signal to you to say, there's no hormones here, we need to make more testosterone. That part's great. You end up getting more testosterone production. Some guys feel better, most guys don't. But what happens is you're now dealing with all the other issues that come with blocking estrogen receptors in the brain, in the liver, in the bones. There's so many other tissues you're blocking it in. And what happens is over time, guys, not only they don't feel better, they don't feel the benefits of the high testosterone, but they get issues like fatty liver disease. We're potentially going to be looking at early onset dementia with these guys. It's something that hasn't been studied long term, and it's marketed as a way to have your cake and eat it too. If it worked as well as they say it did, all the top practitioners in the world would use it. The thing that's coming onto the market now, which is exciting, I met the CEO at this conference I was speaking at, is this oral testosterone. And this could be, if it does work the way that they say it does, it could be a way for guys to be able to augment their natural production without shutting it down. This is the thing that I would be holding out for to see if it eventuates. I wouldn't be using a retired, repurposed breast cancer medication. They don't even use it in women for breast cancer because of the side effects. So I wouldn't go near it with a 10-foot pole. Wait for other innovations in the field to come out.
Yeah. Okay, for sure. There was one I thought was interesting here, because I've got a view on this. Do you think high testosterone levels will lead to less approach anxiety? So, I think before we really started sort of getting into sort of examining this and working on this with you, Dave, and everything, I thought, and I think James as well probably thought, yes, boost up your testosterone, you're just going to become this animal, and you're like, yeah, you've got no fear, you're just like, yeah, walk up to the stunning model and like, yeah, hey babe, you know, how about it, kind of thing, and it's no problem. Actually, I think it's more nuanced than that. I think it probably helps somewhat, but not quite in the way that maybe people think it does. I don't think in my own life, and the other things as well. What's interesting is that we also thought that increasing testosterone would effectively make you into this like 22-year-old horn dog who just, you know, just wants to get laid the whole time, and therefore, even if they do have approach anxiety, they just overcome it because the requirement for intimacy is so great that, you know, it becomes less, you know, that they just don't give a shit. That also, I found, hasn't been the case because it seems, if anything, to calm you down. So I don't know what your view on his question is. I would say maybe marginally, but I don't think it's a magic pill. And actually, if anything, depending on your age and your situation, it may even not make your approach anxiety worse, but it might make you almost less inclined to approach because you're more chill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of layers to that, and I don't want to go too esoteric and woo-woo, but you know, James and I have spoken about a bit recently the difference in personality type of guys who are really just natural go-getters for you know, a lot of promiscuous sex versus guys who are just naturally wired for like a one partner kind of thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with either type of guy. And I think depending on the context and the circumstances they're raised, I mean, one would be considered a problem and one would be considered optimal. And if you swap the environment, it would be vice versa. I think it's interesting that testosterone is scientifically correlated with conservative beliefs. And I wonder if that is I wonder if the protect and provide instinct makes men more likely to partner up rather than pursue this polyamory playboy kind of thing. But I also think there's a huge individual aspect to this, and I think personality type's a factor.
Well, I mean,
I think that it.
Sorry, carry on.
There you go.
No, I was just going to say on a fundamental level, if you say you've got a guy who's a bit low T, and then he starts taking testosterone, and he becomes, you know, his testosterone level improves. Do you think that guy is going to find it easier to walk up to a cute girl in a coffee shop and say, "Hey, you look nice. I want to come and say hello," or do you think it's not going to actually make that much difference?
I think it would make a difference. I don't think it's going to be as big of a factor as the stuff that you guys talk about. Like what you guys seem to be talking about is exposure therapy, right? Like just get rejected 100 times and then the fear goes. So the analogy I'll use here is, let's say I have like a nootropic, like a brain boosting product. If I've got some kind of, let's say I'm in university and I've got an exam, if I haven't studied for the exam and I have no experience in the field, taking this would probably make me perform better, but it wouldn't replace if I actually knew what I was talking about. Now, if I actually knew what I was talking about and I had this, then that would be fantastic. So I think like we have this term called ceteris paribus, which is like if all other variables are held constant, then more testosterone, he'd be better at cold approach for sure. But I don't think he would become a cold approach Casanova without exposure therapy.
So again, it's like what we were talking about with the gym. You've got to meet the medicine halfway. So it's probably going to help you somewhat, but you've still got to go out there and do the reps and practice, because you're not just going to immediately overnight become, you know, James Bond or whatever, just because you've used some testosterone for a month. It doesn't really work like that. So I would agree with you. I think it helps somewhat, but I don't think it's this silver bullet that maybe people kind of think it might be.
Yeah, and I think the gym analogy and the meeting the medicine halfway is important. Like if you said I wanted to deadlift 200 kilos, then being on testosterone is going to help you progress with that massively. But you still have to learn the deadlift technique, and you still have to go through the practice of deadlifting. You're just going to get better at it quicker. So I think that the testosterone, biologically, it would reduce the impact of stress. So you'd basically get less overwhelmed and kind of feared and jacked up from stress. But it's not going to make that completely go away, especially if you have no experience in it. So it would be an amplifier.
Yeah, and it's funny actually, even discussing more illicit substances. I'm not sure even if there's an illicit substance, because I thought I don't know how much I can really talk about this on YouTube, but I thought that maybe Charlie would or Coke would be something that would be very helpful in that situation, and maybe for some people it is, but it doesn't. If I were to take it, I tend to get quite introverted and I just go into my own head and I'm not that bothered about talking to people. MDMA, maybe, but the problem with those things is you can start to get a little bit sloppy. Alcohol is obviously the main one that people use, which kind of works because that's probably how England is mainly populated, through people being pissed and getting together and having sex. But so I guess it works on one level, but at the same time, again, you can get very sloppy on it. And so in the end, that's a sort of separate issue, really. But whatever you're thinking about using to enhance your powers in this area, you can't get away from the fact that you still need practice, you still need exposure, and you still need to know what you're doing. Even if you want to use something as a little bit of an enhancer to try and boost yourself up a bit.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the exogenous, non-bioidentical substances, whether it's things like cocaine, MDMA, or whether it's like over-the-counter supplements, or even on the other end of the spectrum for guys who are like super anxious, like things like Valium, Xanax, benzodiazepines. I think that from my understanding, and I did drop out of neuropsychiatry, but I did do a pretty good amount of units before I dropped. And the way that I would propose that it works is that where everyone's different. Some of us are a bit more driven, some of us are a bit more calm, some of us a bit more this, a bit more that. So what like if you took 5 guys and you were like, what would be the wonder drug for cold approach? For one guy, it might be cocaine, and for another guy, it might be a little hit of a joint. For another guy, it might be a couple of Jaeger bombs. For another guy, it might be a Valium, because it would be whatever kind of their neurological wiring is kind of needing a push in the right direction to bring them into balance. So I think when you're like, and I imagine like when you're cold approaching someone, you want to come across as confident and present and in control, and kind of just you basically want to be kind of unfazed. And I think that there would be different things that would help different people with that, depending on what their kind of baseline would be.
Yeah. I mean, oddly for me, it might be more the benzo type stuff actually, because it would make you more chilled, and it kind of makes you quite present and quite focused. So, but it's like you said, it's different for everybody. And by the way, kids, don't do drugs. That's not what we're recommending here. But it's an interesting topic of conversation anyway. I mean, obviously the key question was TRT and whether that makes a difference. And I think the consensus is a little bit, but you still need to practice. You still need to get out there and talk to women.
I would say that TRT would give you and this is where I think it's fantastic that you guys are doing what you're doing, because I think what you guys are teaching in terms of communication is such a valuable skill, is that TRT would just be an amplifier for making what you guys are teaching work better.
Yeah, I spent at least 20 years doing this stuff with nothing, because I was completely sober. I wasn't drinking alcohol. I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't doing anything. And I'm not recommending that to everybody, because everyone's different, whatever. That was something that I had to do because of my life circumstances and my health and stuff. But it certainly puts you it's certainly great training, because if you have to do everything completely cold, as it were, with with nothing to even boost you up at all, you've got to learn the actual thing. There's nowhere to hide, right? So I think that, there's some value in learning the skill set without having to feel like you have to rely on something. But this is still somewhat separate to the value of TRT, which of course is multifaceted.
Absolutely. And one of the points that I think it's worth throwing in before we wrap is that what I've observed in my client population is that drive in men is universal. So increasing sex, like low sex drive, also tends to come with low career drive, low self-development drive, low drive for hobbies. And conversely, high drive for conquest of business, of whatever realm of endeavor you're in, also tends to bleed into higher sex drive, whether that is, pursuing multiple women or, finding a girlfriend or a wife or whatever. But drive is really important, and drive is facilitated by healthy testosterone levels. And all the stuff that helps the male body make healthy testosterone levels will facilitate that drive. So all of this stuff that we've spoken about tonight ultimately is, I think, what everyone who is doing this course, and probably everyone who's listening to my content, I think what we all have in common, whether we realize it or not, and again, not to get too esoteric, is we're wanting to improve our subjective experience of being alive. We want to make our life better in a way that we think would improve it for the period that we're here. And for different people, that involves different things. And I think what's really important to understand is that as we get older and we start to eat more for longevity and nutrition, not just what tastes good, or we start to plan our time and week around what will benefit us long-term, not just what's going to be fun tonight, I think it's good to be going, okay, how can I be strategic with this? How can I be efficient with this? But how can I also still have fun and live a life that's enjoyable and worth living? And I think this is where looking at good quality food, good quality exercise, good quality daily habits, and balancing that with a limited amount, keeping your alcohol consumption to as minimal as possible while still enjoying the experiences that you're having, and staying off as much of the harmful pharmaceutical drugs and all that kind of stuff as well. I think if you can integrate that in as part of the strategy with what you're trying to do with the work that you're doing, here as part of, learning how to speak to women and how to approach better, I think that's what's going to lead to getting the outcome that people are trying to achieve.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how much more time you've got. Obviously, we're over the hour now. There are a few more questions, but we can wrap at any point. I mean, I don't know, James, if you've got any particular favourites you want to pull out here. I mean, this one guy.
There's the end-all question about ashwagandha. There was a question about all three, which is usually quite good. Oh yeah, what would you recommend? Tonkat Ali, maca, or ashwagandha for natural test boost?
Ashwagandha any day of the week. And there would be people who would disagree with me on this, who would have valid disagreements. Mechanistically, they're very different. So it would, when it comes to ashwagandha is like nature's benzodiazepine. It has the same mechanism of action as Valium, Xanax. It works on the same receptor, does the same thing, just a lot milder. And what this is recognizing, the reason why this increases testosterone production is it reduces stress-related testosterone suppression. So when we look at the function of the human, the ultimate priority is survival, and the last priority is reproduction. And testosterone is important for reproduction. So what's happening is if you're constantly stressed, psychologically, biologically stressed, ashwagandha is going to help offset the testosterone suppression that comes with this, which is what most people who are shopping for supplements are dealing with. So if you go onto the website for KSM 66, they have really good infographics showing the clinical trials for this. The dose is 300 milligrams twice a day of specifically the KSM 66 ashwagandha extract. That's the one you want to use. Arrow make one. You can get it off iHerb, Amazon, anything. And not everyone does well with this. People who have naturally low cortisol levels, who aren't stressed, they can find this can make them sedated, lazy, lethargic. But guys who are naturally a bit anxious, highly strung, edgy, kind of cranked up a bit, this can sometimes be like a miracle thing, and it can drastically increase testosterone levels if they're suppressed due to stress. So I would strongly recommend high stress guys look at that. If you want to check out a book that I learned this from originally many years ago, it's called Master Your Tea by Christopher Walker. Talks about all the same nutrition stuff, all the same stuff I spoke about today. Really good book.
Awesome. Good. So where can guys find you, Dave, if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at I'm Dave Lee. If you search Dave Lee TRT on YouTube, there's over 100 videos. I recently did some great in-person podcasts all across the state, so there's lots of really good content up there. And then you can find me on my website, advancedfundamentalhealth.com. I have a $19 a month school group, which is called the TRT Academy. We do Q&A sessions in there twice a week. And there's also some $29 ebooks, which are like TRT guides, if anyone does want to progress down that rabbit hole. Just to answer some quick questions that I imagine will come up afterwards. If you want to work with the best clinic in the United States, it's called Victory Men's Health. If you want to work with the best clinic in Australia, which is my clinic, I'm biased, it's called Primal Zone. If you want to work with the best clinic across Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and the Baltics, it's my new clinic called TRT Baltic. And the best clinic in the UK, if you need TRT help, at the moment is Alphagenics with Dr. Max Draper. That's where I'd recommend going if you want to get testosterone prescribed, if anyone's wondering.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, just to kind of wrap it up from myself and Troy's perspective, we've both been working with Dave for a long time. He's been instrumental in helping us sort out our hormones, and highly recommend guys get in touch, whether you want to check out your, get your bloods done, and then whether you want feedback on your natural testosterone levels or whether you want to consider TRT. Dave is your man to read the results as well, and also not bound by regulation because you flip between, I believe, Thailand still and Lithuania, right? So you're not subject to the same kind of draconian.
I'm all over.
All over.
Yeah.
Nice. Any final thoughts?
Great testimonials to finish on here. Alexander Good, good friend of ours, a long-term client of ours, said, I did a consult with Dave and read the book, Master Your T. He recommended, changed my entire life. So you can't really get better than that, can you, as a way? And Alex is a great guy. There was clearly some work to be done in this area, and it's great to see the strides that he's making, and obviously with Dave's help. So, if you want a testimonial, then that's your quote, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, as always, super helpful. I mean, if you've got time, we can maybe even do another one of these, because there's just so much to cover. There's so many questions, and I don't know, it's just such a fascinating area. But obviously, you're a very busy, in-demand man. So thank you for your time and for helping us out with this one.
Oh man, absolutely. This kind of network and content got me through one of the most horrifically difficult periods of my life. So I'm happy to make myself as available as much as possible to get back and help others.
And I do genuinely think that it is under talked about in this space. If you look at the game space, particularly a few years back when myself and James were coming up, I mean, nobody talked about this at all. Like I said, it was all the verbal stuff. It was all like, say she looks French, and tell a story about when you were in Paris and blah blah blah, and like everyone completely ignored what is actually such a key fundamental factor in female to male attraction. It's kind of mind blowing, really, when you think about it. But at least we're fighting the good fight now.
Yeah, and the part that you guys are doing well is that you're marrying the two, because a whole bunch of guys are just going, oh, well, let's just max out this or max out that, because, like what was touched on before is, guys just want to play their strengths and, sweep their weaknesses under the rug and overcompensate over here. And it's, you've got to do it all. And that's a really strong reoccurring theme I've found in life is you got to do it all, because otherwise the thing that you're neglecting will offset all the hard work you're doing over here. And, yeah, look, the closing point I'll make here is that, and if anyone wants to learn more about this, I've got a 3-part lecture series on YouTube called Your Brain on Testosterone and the War on Masculinity. It's becoming more and more difficult to have optimal testosterone in this world. And this absolutely has to be the first point of call, because if you pull the trigger on TRT, you're going to have to do all this stuff anyway. So optimize and nail all this stuff first. But if you get to a point where you're like, I'm doing everything right, I'm living very well, my testosterone levels are still in the gutter, and I've got all these symptoms and I'm not feeling well, TRT is a trigger that you don't want to pull unless you have to. But if you have to pull it, you must pull it. And that there's polarity there. It's something that if you need it, you absolutely must do it. And the longer you put it off, the more quality of life. Quality of life is front loaded in your youth. So if you need it, there's no reason to push back. But you also want to make sure that you need it, and going to, either coming to myself for a consultation if you want to work with me, or working with any of those providers who I mentioned. They're going to be people who are going to look at the situation and go, yes, you need it, or no, you don't. And that's the kind of people that you need in your court with this.
Awesome. And if guys want to get in touch with Dave or myself or Troy, it's Troy@realtroyfrancis.com is the email, info@jamestuss.com. Much appreciated, Dave. As always, lots of valuable information on there. And yeah, nothing else to say other than hopefully we can run a part 2 in the not too distant future as well.
Good stuff, guys. Many thanks for tuning in. If you've got any questions, email us, as James said, troy@realtroyfrancis.com or info@jameshuss.com. We can put you in touch with Dave. Sayonara. See you later, guys.
See you guys. Bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye.